Ecosystems are constantly changing, but what if where you lived looked completely different every few hours? We're going to explore a new ecosystem in today's episode, all about the ever-changing intertidal zone. The great state of Maine has lots of rocky coast, which provides incredible little pockets of habitat. Today, we are going to learn about the different sections of the intertidal zone, the organisms who live here, and the incredible adaptations that allow them to survive in this harsh environment. Before we get started, if you need a refresher on tides and what causes them, you can check out this video. Intertidal zones exist anywhere the ocean meets the land. It stretches from the lowest area that is only exposed at the lowest tide to the highest area that only gets misted by the waves. Like when you stand too close to someone who spits when they talk. Let's start off by looking at the intertidal zone zones, the zones within the zone, the further zones that make up the intertidal zone. You may find this episode even more delightful if you try to count how many times I say zone. First, we have the spray zone. This is the highest zone where marine organisms are found on the rocky shore. This zone is mostly dry and only dampened by ocean spray and is submerged only during very high tides or storm surge. The next zone down the rocky shore is the upper intertidal zone. This area remains dry for long stretches between high tides. Our next zone is the middle intertidal zone. This is the area over which the tides ebb and flow twice a day. The next and lowest zone of the rocky shore is the lower intertidal zone. This area is usually submerged and is only exposed at very low tides. Organisms that live in the intertidal zone form their own communities across the elevation gradient. Now that we're more familiar with this area, let's explore and see what type of organisms call each zone their home. Organisms in this area are pretty sparse. There aren't a lot of resources for getting energy or shelter. Typical organisms that live in this area include barnacles, limpets, and periwinkles, which all have hard protective coverings. As we travel down, we will continue to see some of the same species of organisms, but each zone provides more diverse conditions, which makes it inhabitable for more diverse species. So we can still typically find barnacles, limpets, and periwinkles, but now we start seeing shore crabs and green algae. Here in the middle intertidal zone, we have reached an area that has way more access to water, so we should see a greater variety in organisms. You will still see barnacles, shore crabs, and sea snails in this area, but now you can also find sponges and different varieties of algae, mussels, sea stars, and sea anemones. We can explore the lower intertidal zone right now because it's low tide. Soon, this spot will again be covered in water. Typically, you will see sponges, shore crabs, sea snails, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, oysters, clams, and small fish in this zone. If you're still here liking this video, let us know and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. As we've seen, there's a considerable change in the community of organisms from zone to zone. Organisms that call the intertidal zone home must be able to survive extreme changes in temperature, moisture, and salinity, and also be able to withstand strong waves and exposure to predators on land and underwater. Because of this, most organisms here have adapted to these physical and biological stresses. Often, we see an organism's upper limit, or the highest zone it can occupy, determined by its ability to cope with physical stresses. Stresses like desiccation, drying out, or temperature fluctuations, whereas an organism's lower limit is more determined by biological stresses like predation and competition. We can see evidence of this in each zone. Organisms in the spray zone are mostly exposed to physical stressors like air exposure and desiccation. They're not dealing with as many biological stresses such as competition for space because most species aren't able to inhabit this zone. As we move down, organisms in the upper zone are subject to high levels of both biological and physical stressors. As we saw earlier, this area is dominated by barnacles, which makes sense because they are well adapted to the physical stresses of this zone. Holding on to water is the name of the game. Barnacles are able to close up and trap some seawater inside of their protective covering. They just hang out like that until the tide comes back in. This covering is also good protection from predators such as crabs and the birds who have access to these organisms when the tide is out. Algae is also found in this zone, but it's usually limited to green algae. Green algae is better at handling long exposure to sunlight. The middle zone has more time submerged and less time exposed to the elements, but biological stressors become more of a factor here. The more species and number of individuals means more competition for food and space, as well as more predator species. Physical stresses in this zone still include desiccation when it's low tide, but wave action is more of an issue. Barnacles, mussels, and kelps anchor themselves to the rocks. Organisms here are either very flexible, very sturdy, or otherwise well-suited to stand up to wave energy. This zone is where we start seeing the lower limits of the species that hang out in the upper zones. Barnacles are a great example. They're mostly found at the higher parts of this zone, but the lower limit is often determined by the presence of mussels. Mussels can't handle drying out as well as the barnacles, so they live at their upper limit, but can attach themselves in such a way that ends up suffocating the barnacles, which obviously limits the barnacles' ability to be in the same area. In the lower zone, there are not as many physical stresses, as there is very little exposure to air, heat, and wave action. So the main stresses in this zone come from biological stresses due to the increase in resources. More resources means more competition. And if you are a prey organism, that means predation is more of an issue for you because you are part of those increased resources. To get a complete picture, just under the intertidal zone is the subtidal zone. Many predator species live in this zone, such as octopus and larger fish that prey on organisms living in the low intertidal zone when the tide comes in, because now they have more access to this area. Larger marine predators, such as sea lions and seals, find high tide in the intertidal zone ideal for foraging for their next meal. Tide pools can form anywhere in the intertidal zone where seawater collects in depressions or cracks in rocks, like this one behind me. Depending on the depth of the tide pool, it creates a microecosystem that can support any of the organisms we saw today. The unique stressor in tide pools is the increased salinity of the water along with the rapid change in available space as the water evaporates throughout the day. Human activity can also be stressors to organisms living here in the intertidal zone. You should absolutely explore this environment if you ever visit. But here are a few things that you should do to make sure that you're not adding stresses to the organisms who live here. Step safely. Be really careful not to step on a marine animal, but also watch out for yourself. Rocks are slippery and most surfaces are sharp. The best way to observe this area is to carefully approach with proper footwear and then quietly wait next to the tide pool or other area you're observing. Do not collect seashells. I know, they're super cool, but instead of taking shells, take photos of shells. Many of the shells that you see on the beach can still be a home to a snail or hermit crab. Properly dispose of trash when you visit the beach. Trash can easily be washed into the intertidal habitat, get stuck, and cover these organisms who are kind of trapped on the rocks and harm them. Go outside and explore the ecosystems near you. And if you want to learn more science, you can check out this video next. So, zone from zone to zone. Intertidal zone.